When I first bought models, when I first got on my bicycle and go on my own downtown to buy a model car, and the guy behind them sold me the model in the sporting goods store. Said, build it, bring it back, and we'll put it in the store window. And they would have a few dozen models in the store window that other people built. And I would stand and stare at those because that time, that's the only way you could see what other people were building.
Okay, so my early influences were always magazines. Local hobby shops didn't have model shows. 6, 7, 8 years old, I wasn't exposed to that. It was only like what a relative or someone you wanted to visit had on their shelf. If they had like a Cuddy Sark or some massive ship model that had rigging, that was sort of the beginnings of what I saw other people build.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I saw magazines. Wow, there's like so much stuff you can do. Doug White for Model Car Muse. Magazines with car modeling content have been a big resource, sustaining me through years in the hobby, inspiring builds, helping to improve my skills, opening my eyes to new ideas, and introducing me to other modelers.
I got a couple copies of Model Car Handbook that the AMT put out. One of them is dog-eared and pages bent and missing because I looked at all the pictures, read all the captions, went back and read it again. That stuff was an influence because it was built by some of the better modelers who were able to get their models into a publication like that at the time.
1962. It's got the AMT story. The 10 best model cars.
This is the one that I did a clone or recreated. It's upstairs on the display. The only thing I changed was the tires. I put the Racemaster pad printer tires on it because the guy who built it, his name was Bud. If they were available, Bud would have put them on there. But all those, the body, everything, it all came from 1962 or earlier model kits. Well, just old stuff. Yeah. There's a lot of modification to get the body to sit right in the frame. It's an AMT dragster frame, which is what he used. But once I started figuring things out, the wheelbase wasn't, I had to move the rear axle and do some things. And you start doing the things that he must have done to make it look, because I got the photos to try to match, So I know it's competition yellow, and it's the same paint that Tester's been making for 100 years. The neat part is the decals. I found the sheet of decals that he used there from an annual AMT kit from 1961.
Oh, wow. How did you
I got a box of decals.
Oh, okay.
And
flipping through.
They were in there. They were actually usable. See that? This book's still influencing me now, 50 years later.
Rick says he's still being influenced by a model car publication 50 years later. But what he doesn't mention is the influence that he has been on us. Rick Hanmore has always been willing to share his experience with other modelers. We've each written articles for magazines, and I can tell you that it's both a lot of work and a joy. This is not a video on the history of car model publications, though I am grateful to the editors and publishers who took the risk to produce these magazines. But mostly I want to thank them for providing a way for us to learn from some amazing people who are first and foremost model builders, but who are also amazing writers. This video is an ode to the writers. I have been fortunate to get to know some of the writers who inspired me early on. At the 40th NNL Nationals in 2019, I caught up with Bill Coulter and Tim Boyd. And Rich Morgan gives us a glimpse into his early start in the hobby. As a kid, I built models, took a break, and it wasn't until after I had lived in Europe, went to Art Center in California, started my business in New York City as a commercial advertising photographer. Great thing about Manhattan, there were specialized bookstores. I found these magazines that were called Scale Auto Enthusiast. There were some back issues. They were maybe only 2 years old, but I bought every one they had. And I start leafing through these magazines. There's one guy that stood out, and that was Bill Coulter. I just kept reading his articles and said, you know what? I've got to get back into this. Now as adults, people are building. Bill basically, single-handedly got me back into building models, and I can't thank him enough.
To come from somebody like you, I'm very, very flattered.
Bill's been writing since the early 70s for Model Magazine?
Actually, the first article I ever did that I got paid for was a feature article for Stock Car Racing Magazine. I had already run it by the editor as to what I was going to do, but I submitted it and he rejected it. And I was destroyed. My late cousin was working with me as a photographer. He sat me down and he said, look, it's the first time you've done something of this degree. And at least the guy didn't just say, go away. He said, you need to do it a little differently. What I had done is I'd gone over to Bristol. I'd gotten to know the two guys that owned the rights to, the facility there in Nashville.
Sure.
And they agreed to stay after one of the races, and we sit around for a couple hours and talked. And so I basically took the interview and just transcribed it. It was a good experience because what it made me do was learn how to be creative and still be telling the truth. So I had to look at the thing as, how can I spruce it up and kind of sweeten it up and make it so it's a little more readable. And he grabbed it immediately. That was what I call the first professional accepted article.
I was walking out of the Scranton Hobby Center, I think I was 13 at the time, and I feel a hand on my shoulder and my throat, and just, I got to get you up to the 7th floor of the Scranton Life building. You got to come to work for me. And I'm thinking, I'm just trying to get into freshman. Never mind. Oscar got together with Bob McLeod out of New Jersey, I believe, and they started taking a small, every other month mini version, and they blew it up into a monthly, and it came out as Car Model. And it was very popular. And I went up to see him, and he said, I want you to do this. And he said, this will be your photo section, this will be your writing and your model building, yada, yada, yada. So I took the job, and I had a ball with it. I was the only kid in high school writing for a career, fresh out of
The model car stuff, first time I had something on the cover of a model magazine was January of 1974 of a magazine called Car Model. The way that wound up happening was I'd struck up a friendship with Hank Borger. Back in those days, we didn't have the internet and a lot of that stuff. One time he said, I know so little about the kind of stuff you're building. Could you show me an example of what you're building, and then tell me how you research it to know that you have it accurate? So in those days, I wasn't shooting my own pictures. My late cousin was shooting my pictures for me. And I just sat down and basically told him the story. He thanked me, and that was kind of the end of that. But one day at work, on my lunch hour, I had some errands to run, so on the way back, I thought, I haven't stuck my head in the local hobby shop for a while. Well, I walk in, and there on the newsstand are 6 copies of the January issue of the Car Model magazine. And I took all 6 copies. And I paid for them, took them back to work, and started handing them out to everybody. Well, our secretary, after a little while, she said, Mr. Coulter, I hate to raise this question. I'm not finding anything in this magazine about your model. It's on the cover. Lo and behold, I went through it, and my model wasn't mentioned in the magazine, though it was on the cover. Well, then there was this little script that said, if you're wondering about the cover, yes, it's Bill Coulter's Richard Petty 64 Plymouth. And if you want to read about it, the story will be in the next issue.
This car was a project car for Scale Auto Enthusiast magazine. It was in 7 episodes from, I think, December of 1981 through February of 83. And this was the final color photo shot on my deck without very good equipment. But every issue describes something I did for this. How we do the working doors, how we did the velour interior, cutting down the hood and hinging it, the sideways hinged hood on the back. The paint, again, was all hobby paint, done with Pactra, candy colors, decanted, and an airbrush.
Those wheels.
Those were the wheels from the AMT 65 Riviera Silhouette kit. Now they have rings on them, they have outside rings, which were the inside rings from the 33 Willys kit. Deep in the rear, shallow in the front.
So no magic machine work.
Nothing.
Out of the kit beauty.
This was the idea, was to show to average modelers how they could do these kind of stuff. That was the supposition behind it.
I really didn't get into writing for model car stuff until my longtime friend, model builder Wayne Moyer, used to see us now. And one day I was over at his house and he said, "Bill, I got to show you this thing." And it was first issue of Scale Auto Enthusiast. And he said, "I really want you to consider doing something." Well, I had an article I had started for one of the magazines, another one that went under. I thought, well, what the heck? I got it out, and it was on, at that time, how to take a 70 Charger and a 70 Daytona NASCAR stock car kit and merge them to make a completely stock street version. I sent it in, and Gary Schmidt was very happy with it. Wanted to know if I could keep sending stuff. More. And I got paid. So listening, I got paid a whopping $20 for it. But it wasn't. I tell people now, I don't do this and haven't done this for the money or for the notoriety or anything. I do it because I really love what I'm doing.
Not only myself, but think of all the other people you inspired by doing that. You got us going.
I appreciate that. I try to write my material to the vast majority.
Yeah.
I encourage other people and have for a long time, and I've said, please, don't sit down at your computer or a typewriter or whatever it was and try to write me a story. I said, I want you to sit down and tell me a story. Because I said, I've had people over the years that have said, Coulter, when I read one of your articles, I feel like I'm sitting and talking to you. I said, well, that's what I've tried to accomplish, so it's really.
I did a column for Street Rider magazine for 17 years, over 200 columns, and this was another how-to series. Sure. And it finished up in August of '82. It's the first model car to ever show on the cover of the magazine in color. This column was incredibly popular. It was consistently generated, the second most mail of any feature in the magazine for a 15-year period. And
That was just such a.
it was a big deal. Yeah, it was a great. It really. My whole idea was to try to make adult model car building respectable. And I think that between that and what Gary did with his magazine and the GSL and the NOL, I think all those things kind of helped move that along.
One of our true ambassadors.
Well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But back then, I was just a pissed off young guy that
Just having fun.
I was sorry of sick of getting these really weird looks from the cashiers at Kmart. Who, where they were just being friendly, and they said, "I'm buying these for your kid." Wait, you're not old enough yet. What are these for exactly? It was just not something that people respected as an adult.
Oh, sure.
So that was kind of.
Understand it. We're just playing with toys.
Yeah, so that's why that was my biggest motivation in doing the columns.
Give all the guys that just were street rod readers. Saw the model
I can't tell you how many. I can't tell you how many people told me that. It brought them back to the hobby. Or further, this really got a lot of kids, and I wrote it with adult phraseology and because I found very early in my career that you set the level by what you communicate. If you communicate at this level, there may be some people who don't maybe aspire to that, but when they see it, they bring themselves up to it. And it was the same thing in modeling. In car model, all the articles are written for kids. And that really kind of it bumped me,
Well, yeah,
And I mean,
like that issue, when I got that issue,
yeah.
when I was a kid.
Yeah, so was I.
Wow.
It was just 15 years old. But
that blew me away. I mean, I never even really thought too much about how the audience was being addressed.
Yeah.
I was just like, people are doing cool
but
stuff.
it was the stuff that, and that was actually one good thing about the editor then is he raised the level. There were people like Hank Berger and Jim Keeler, and all of a sudden they were writing at a higher level, and that helped.
And Hank Berger always had a story with his car.
I loved his stuff.
It wasn't like, well, I use these parts and these
Exactly.
parts.
And
It was always about like the car at night on the street.
I know,
and
yeah,
what
the
happened.
Street Marauder.
Oh man.
I still have a file of all those. And then, I mean, the two people that probably influenced me most as a writer were Don Emmons and Hank Organ. And, you know, like you said, Hank always had a story. And I always try to do a story in my articles until maybe about 15 years ago when those stories started getting edited out. It was like, well, okay, if they're not going to appear, I'm going to be the one editing them out, not somebody else.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Always good to see you.
Indeed. And just so for your audience here, you got to know this guy, huge inspiration to me. He set the level a whole quantum higher when his 53 White Studebaker came out in 1990. So just so you know, this is the guy.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. It's fun.
Next time you come across a car modeling article, know that the writer is a builder like you, writing for the love of the hobby. Follow your muse wherever you may find it, and may there always be a project on your bench. Thanks for watching.